Hi everyone. In this video we will go over data analytics or artificial intelligence machine learning. So for this week 6 we are going to learn how to use an open source tool on how to predict or to create a prediction model or a classification model. So to start is we will need to go and get familiar with the data set. And before we start actually with the data set, we will follow those kind of common steps that are used when analyzing data using data analytics. So step 1, it is where we need to define or understand the purpose of this model. So whether we want to predict or classify. So predict, usually it is used when we have a continuous variable that we want to predict as our target variable. For example, here we have a couple of independent variables or variables that we want to use in order to predict the salary that an employee will get. So the salary is a continuous variable here because it goes, let's say, from 0 all the way to millions of dollars, right, for each individual or for each record in an Excel sheet, for example. So in that case, salary is a continuous variable or a numeric variable. Then we use prediction models for it. And if we are trying to predict or classify whether, let's say, an employee will accept the job versus not accept the job based on their level of education, experience, gender, and whether they are a minority or not, then that will be classification. So if it is accept or not accept, that's categorical variable, or we can call it, it's a class accept, or the other class will be not accept, right? So in that case, we call that classification. We want to classify that variable or classify whether it is going to be accept or not accept. So I hope that's kind of clear what we mean here by classify versus predict. And then we will obtain the data. So we will obtain the data, and we already have the data set here, and we can actually start with, then we move on to step number 3, where we will explore, clean and pre-process data. So in data analytics, actually this step is taking the most time. So you will need to explore the data, clean the data, because most of these data or the data sets that you will receive, they are a mess. So you will need to spend a lot of time cleaning that data set and making it or prepare it so that way you can run a prediction model or a classification model. So we will start by cleaning the data. And so our data set, as you can see here, we want to classify those individuals or those patients. So we have more than 462 patients records here, and we have different variables about those patients. And the outcome or the target that we want to predict, whether this patient or this individual will end up with having a coronary heart disease or not. So that's what we want to, and here we have only 2 options. So it is either the coronary heart disease will be present or absent. So in this case, this is a classification problem because we are trying to predict or a categorical variable. In this case, it is present or absent. All right, so the first step, as we said here, we will need to clean or check missing values. So to check missing values, this is what we have as our data set. So in the directions here I gave you is one way is to look at, let's say, to use pivot tables. So we have learned pivot tables, and it is asking us, because I already know which one has missing values, so I asked you to use pivot tables for those 2 variables because I know one of them has missing values. But let's say that you want to do or to find out if you have missing values in this data set in a quick or in a nutshell or very quickly. So I will use this step here, Control A, and then highlight. And so this is what I will do. So I will say Control A to highlight the whole data set, and then Control F to do the find, and then I will say next. So I will not put anything find what. So I will just put it blank. That way it can find me any blank cell in this data set. automatically you will see that it took me to this data set or to this variable here. And I have a couple of missing values here. So that in that case, I am going to need to replace those missing values. And to do that is we can use pivot tables also kind of to, as I explained here, we can just use pivot tables quickly by highlighting those two guys, the age range and age onset, and then insert pivot or pivot table in this case. And I will follow the directions that I gave you here. So let's say they want us to drag age range to rows. And then they want us to drag age onset twice in here. So they want us to put maximum versus minimum here. So now you will notice that we have young, middle-aged, and old as the range for age, right? But also we have a fourth category here. It's called blank, and we have 55 as the maximum and the minimum for this group. So in this case, this is an indication that we have blank values here. So as we have seen earlier, that was the values that were missing. So now we will need to replace those missing values. And to do that, which is in B, we will need to replace this missing value. So let's go back to the data set and see, as we have seen here, these values that we're missing here are all 55, the age of onset. So when the disease started, it was in 55. All right, so let's see. Now we will need to replace these values. So 55, where should we put it? Is it under young? Is it under middle age or old? So to do that, to decide and to be able to decide where to put 55 is we will need to go and look at the data dictionary. So as you can see here, we have a data dictionary and we have age range and age onset. So the age range here, it's telling us the scale that if the person onset age is greater than 55, then they are going to be old. If the middle age or if the individual onset age is greater than 25, then they are middle age. Less than 26, young. So now actually you can see and infer from this data dictionary that the middle age or 55 is under middle age, because here old, they need to be greater. We didn't say greater or equal, so it says greater. So now we know where to replace the 55. So we can just say here middle age, and I need to make sure that it is matching the spelling that I have here for middle age. So I'll just copy the cell there and I will paste it here in the blank area. So I'll highlight this guy until I reach. So now I have my data set is kind of I don't have missing values. So now the second step is that what I want, so here it's also asking me to freeze the top row. So let's do that, just kind of to make sure that I know my column name. So I will go to view and then freeze top. So now I'll make sure that whenever I scroll, I can still see the column names. Now I need to transform text values into numbers. So this makes life much easier, whether if I want to run, let's say, a regression model or using Microsoft Excel, or I can use Orange as well. So it makes life easier when I can transform those variables into numbers. For example, here, high, low, medium, I can actually infer, or I can say that this is a continuous variable to some extent, because we have kind of an order implied. It's ordinal variable, but I can actually transform this variable into, let's say, low as 1, medium as 2, and high as 3. So that is an ordinal variable, which I can use it as some extent as a continuous variable. So let's do that. I need to replace, so following the directions, I need to replace text with with numbers. So one option is to use the if statement. Another option is to use VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, as we have seen in previous classes. And then another way is to find and replace. So that's the fastest, easiest way. But we need to do it systematically. Let's look at one example of using the if statement. So in our data dictionary, so let's do this one. What I will do is I will insert this variable here. You can delete it because we don't really need numbers, right? So let's delete that number for or value column for now. So now let's use an if statement. So I will say if I want to replace, so if this value equals low, so in quotation mark, then replace it with 1. And then if the value is false, I will say another if this value equals medium, then it has to be 2. So if this cell equals high, then this cell needs to be 3, right? Now I'll be closing all my brackets or parentheses. Now I have, and just double click that guy. Now since it is highlighted, the whole column is highlighted, I will copy. So Control C to copy, and then I will right click. So this is a very tricky step here, because this is the formula. If I copy and paste it here, I will have crazy output here. So let's try it here. I will have this error. So I will go back. So now what I need to do is to right click and then insert only values. So now I can delete this value. I don't need it. So now this is how you can do the rest of the variables here using the if statement if you want to do. And this is actually the scales are provided to you here. So that's how to transform text into numbers using the if statement. So what if we want to use the VLOOKUP versus the HLOOKUP? So high versus low, we have horizontal array. So I can use here HLOOKUP for this, let's say, tobacco intake level. So I'll just insert. Then I will use the HLOOKUP because I have a horizontal table there. So lookup value is this guy, comma. Then the table array, I'll go to the data dictionary. I will highlight this guy. And I will make sure that this is absolute. So the F4, to make sure that it is making it absolute, and then comma. And the row or the index is number 2 because that's the second row. And then I will need to make sure that it is exact match. So exact match, double click on this guy. So this is very important to make it false or exact match, right? So I'll do that, and then I can copy this cell to the rest of the cells. Now you can see for low it has 1 and 3 and so on. So I can do copy this guy, Control C, and then right click and paste values and delete this guy. So that's how we transform text into numbers using the if statement and also the horizontal versus the or HLOOKUP versus VLOOKUP. So for VLOOKUP, let's do this example here. We can do an example. So I will let you do the rest, but I will just show you how we have learned about those. So I will do the present versus absence. Presence versus absence. It is a vertical array. So what I can do is I will just say equals VLOOKUP, and then this is my value, lookup value, and then my array is in the data dictionary here. Make sure that it is absolute, F4, and then index is number 2. Again, I need to make sure that it is an exact match. Close that guy and run it. So now I can copy this cell to the rest of the values. Now if the family history is present, I have it as 1. If it is not present or absent, it is as 0, right? Alright, so this is what we call it, a binary variable or a dichotomy, or you can call it a dummy variable as well. So different names for it. So we can delete this guy. So now